Meeting. The Christmas holiday season bring joy to all of you and your families, and we'll look forward to seeing you in the new year. I'm delighted to introduce this morning a new member of our board of directors, Charlene Stewart, who's sitting over here. Charlene is the eldest of 6 children. She was born in Saskatchewan. She was a frontline healthcare worker and activist, leading to her election in 2003 as the first female president of the SEIU Healthcare and its 60,000 members. She's also vice president of SEIU International. She also serves on the Canadian Labour Congress Executive Committee. Charlene is a Métis, an Indigenous person, and is the first such member of our board, which is a particular point of pleasure. Charlene's being called Canada's Norma Rae for her leadership in the labor movement and her activism, representing the men and women who care for us. And I say us, I mean the older ones among us, particularly in the homes for aged people and people in healthcare who need support. So Charlene, you're a fabulous addition to the board. Thank you very much for coming. We look forward to learning from you and working with you. We're delighted you cast your lot with us. Welcome to Charlene. I'm also delighted that the province has appointed Brian Davies as the new vice chair of the board of Metrolinx, succeeding Stephen Smith. We had a gap there without a vice chair, which I didn't like, and I'm thrilled that the province has invited Brian to be vice chair and that he's accepted. Brian ranks with the finest public servants of his generation, having served in many important roles and continues to do so, receiving every award one can win in that line of work, and is also just a terrific citizen of the province and the country, and we couldn't have a sounder, better person as vice chair. So Brian, congratulations and thank you very much for agreeing to serve.
Thank you.
Next is correspondence. Rats, I gotta dig it out. We've received some correspondence on the, where the heck is it? Correspondence from Mr. Azrani that's been tabled about the service on the Stouffville line and the changes in service there, and management will be sending a response to him to his letter dated September 18. And that brings us to our CEO. Phil, you've been on the job now 2 months and, 2 months and about 5 days, 6 days, something like that. You're doing a terrific job. You made a big impression fast and early, and we're delighted with how you're doing and how you're leading the team. And I pass the leadership over to you. Phil.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I'd like to start sort of my update by bringing to the board's attention of an incident last night that, if it wasn't for our outstanding staff, could have ended in tragedy. Our transit safety officers that were involved in the incident and our staff attendants were involved in the incident aren't here today because their shifts ended at around 5 o'clock this morning, and they are now resting. But let me play back the incident for you. Our transit officers, Caleb Hanna, Steve Cowenbergs, William Ing, and Acting Sergeant Devon Spears attended Rouge Hill Girls Station last night after the station attendant indicated and alerted us to the fact that there was a male party acting strangely at the station. And on arriving, the officers investigated and found a concealed .25 caliber loaded revolver on the suspect. The officers arrested the man and turned him over to the Toronto Police Service, who subsequently charged him. And their actions were praised publicly by the Toronto Police, as they most likely stopped a serious crime and ensured public safety. And in our terms, that goes through as efforts that are no doubt heroic and potentially life-saving. And I think it's fantastic that our people respond like that. And on behalf of myself and the leadership team, I'd just like to echo the praise that the Toronto Police Service heaped on these officers, and just to say, we have a fantastic, dedicated community of people that serve our communities with passion, and that's out there doing fantastic stuff for us every day. And the professionalism that they show in instances like this is just great. And so we will no doubt thank the individuals involved in a more personal way somewhere in the future.
Very nice. Thank you. Thank you for raising it.
I'd like to talk you through some of the achievements. We received a notice to proceed, or EA approval, for the Lakeshore East Corridor, Don River to Scarborough GO station, from the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change, which is a step forward for our capital program. We also issued a request for qualifications for upgrades to Milton GO station, the redevelopment of Meadowvale GO station, and the construction of the station's operations west facility. And last week, most of you will be aware, at Union Station, platforms 4 and 5 reopened, and our train shed roof contract reached substantial completion after 8 years of construction. And I've looked at some of those construction pictures, and it's quite amazing where we started off from and the work that's been done. And huge compliments to Greg Percy and his team for getting the platform opened and operations to resume and get that operational aspect implemented as effectively and as seamlessly as has been done. And a lot has happened on this particular job since construction began. A lot of redesign, bringing a tower crane to construct the atrium over live tracks, raising steel columns, and incorporating provisions for electrification, passive provision for that in the future, and platform widening. And all the while, Greg and his team increased GO services and launched the Up Express as well. So from my side, sincerely thank all of the teams involved. Great achievement and well done. Mostly, though, people that need to be thanked here are the thousands and thousands and thousands of customers that are every day still living with us through the significant program of build we have at Union Station. And we will continue to look at how do we ensure customer experiences through Union Station is as good as is possible at a stage when we are taking this huge hub for all of our operations and for all of the movements of our customers, and make sure that we transition that into what it needs to become for the future. The future program for Union is just massive, and the changes we want to make at Union is so significant. But at the same time, Union is where nearly 86% of our customers travel to, and it's a very important hub for us, and we need to continue to get that right. We've opened Renforth Station Gateway Transit Hub, and it is the easternmost station of the 18-kilometer Mississauga Transitway. This offers better connections between GO Transit, My Way, and TTC, and it's really important because it gives us consistent travel times, and it's any transit hub in our network that needs to become more and more interconnected is really important, and that opened on the 22nd of November. And it's a great milestone for us. More exciting, if we can talk about more exciting, because it's really exciting, Downsview Park is opening soon. So at the end of the year, that'll be our 66th GO station. What's exciting about that is that it has a connection with TTC and the Toronto York Spadina subway extension. And it's a great building block for us as we increase our Barrie services. And to have that is just a good step forward. And so the moment we talk about the TTC, I can't wait to say the following bit, but the moment we talk to TTC, I have an excuse to talk about Andy Byford. Andy is a very good friend, as you know, incredible partner for us at Metrolinx. And it's been superb to have had a month and a half to work with him. I have threatened him with personal violence because if he's taken on this other role, but he didn't flinch, and he is now going to New York, and what a fantastic challenge he's got for that. He's a very good friend, and I'll miss him dearly. We've been out in Toronto at the nighttime a couple of times, and it's been fantastic to work with him for the short stint. And from Metrolinx's side, we wish Andy all of the best and a fantastic future. And it's a loss for us, but it's a gain for New York.
Are you moving that as a motion of thanks to Andy for his partnership over his years here?
I think we do that.
Will you second that, Shukar? Any dissent? Let's record that in the minutes and send him a letter. Thank you.
Leave the bit about the physical violence out. So a Cooksville GO station is a new station for us, and the groundbreaking around that will happen soon. We are very excited about the building and parking structure that we'll have, and the station is anticipated to reach substantial completion in 2020. And moving forward with Cooksville, important for us. In a first for Canada, we brought more than 200 delegates and industry leaders together around fuel cell technology in the transportation sector. This symposium was really well attended. It is very innovative, and it's leading the field in terms of what we can do with hydrogen fuel cells in rail, and it was very exciting. This is a nascent technology for as far as its application in rail goes, and it's the right type of thing. Ontario is very innovative, and for the Ontario government to take such a leading role in such an innovative technology at this point in time is a testament to what we as a province bring to this bigger debate. It's very exciting stuff. Next week, we're doing an Ask Metrolinx town hall meeting, which is already publicly advertised. We are very, very committed as a senior management team to shift the debate in terms of our transparency and the transparency of the decisions we make and the actions we have for Metrolinx. I think we are often busy with complicated, complex programs and lots of stuff that isn't naturally in the public eye, and that can give an impression of not being transparent. And we want to address that, and I'm very keen that we take this Ask Metrolinx approach. We'll be streaming our very open discussion session. Anyone in the public can raise questions now on our website. They can raise questions during the session on the 12th. We'll take questions, any questions that people pose, any questions. So very open and very keen to develop that in the future to more and more of an accessible forum for the communities to talk to Metrolinx. So exciting for us to make that shift. The website is metrolinxengage.com. So if anyone wants to join in person or online on the 12th, very welcome to do so. There's a couple of good news as well. The Ontario Professional Planners Institute awarded Metrolinx, in partnership with WSP, an Excellence in Planning Award in recognition of our new mobility background paper. And Antoine Bailieff, one of our leading lights in the policy and planning area, Lisa Salzberg and the systems planning team deserve kudos for that. It's also my very, very great pleasure to say that the Women's Executive Network named our Chief Planning Officer, Leslie Wu, as one of Canada's most powerful women in the public sector category.
You're here.
I have to say, in the last 2 months, it's not just great to have Leslie on the team. It is superb. Leslie brings her own brand of excitement and energy and just good stuff to the team. And it's just such a privilege to work with Leslie. And trust me, she is one of the most powerful women I've ever met. So, it's also, it's good you're smiling, Leslie. It's also my pleasure to announce that Hope Spadora is our new Vice President for Corporate Real Estate, and Hope will oversee the strategic and operational planning, delivery and management of Metrolinx's multi-billion-dollar real estate portfolio, including negotiation of large contractual arrangements and the like. But so that's what Hope's going to be involved in. The broader message is that Hope is going to contribute significantly to our transit-oriented development program. We need to do more with transit-oriented development. We're very keen to do that, and we're taking decisive steps, which we'll share with you in the next couple of months on how TOD becomes a central part of what we do. And we're not going to do all of this on our own. We can't. Transit-oriented development needs involvement of developers, municipalities, and it needs to be coordinated and harmonized with the transit plans we've got. This is an interesting sort of equation of difficult influences, challenging influences, that needs to be addressed and that can be addressed by relationships rather by organizational structures. But I'm sure we'll have more debate about that publicly in the time to come. It's also my privilege to announce that Sabrina De Nicola Antonio was selected as a next generation infrastructure leader. Now, Sabrina, together with 11 like-minded students from across Canada, was selected by the Canadian Council for Public-Private Partnerships as a next-generation infrastructure leader in Canada. This is just fantastic for us and for Sabrina. She started with Metrolinx in 2010 as a summer student in the legal department and is currently a junior analyst in the customer experience and marketing division. And so this recognition was awarded based on a paper Sabrina completed for a master's program. And I ask you to just join me and say well done to Sabrina. And last but not least, one of our fellow board members, Apkar Aurora, has been designated a CPA Fellow. Well, congratulations, Apkar. This is the highest honor for a chartered professional accountant in Ontario, and it's granted to very few, and it recognizes the professional virtuosity, professional accomplishment, and leadership and contribution to society, and no less the contribution to this board. And Apkar, for that, we really appreciate that, and thank you, and congratulate you as well. If I can return the
Great job. Thank you. Any questions to Phil on these matters he's raised this morning? I see none, so let's keep going. The first item of business is a resolution that Rose Patton's going to move, seconded by Marianne McKenna, that Hope Spadora be appointed Vice President Corporate Real Estate, and that Mark Chavarro be appointed as Vice President of Regional Express Rail Implementation, and that they both be officers of the corporation. Any difference of view or questions about that resolution?
Could they stand up? See them? Are they here?
Is Mark here?
Mark is unfortunately on leave today. Yes.
Is Hope here? No.
They're busy working.
they're working. Yeah. Thank you very much. That's approved. I should have said that we're changing the agenda a bit because one of our colleagues who's presenting today is helping a family member on a healthcare matter early this morning, and will be here later. So we're moving down to later on the agenda, but still in the public session, the business case analysis and benefits management piece and the draft RTP piece, so that he can be here to assist in the presentation of those. But otherwise, we'll just drive through the rest of the agenda. The next item on the agenda is board governance, and I call on Rahul Bardwaj to give us a report from the governance committee. Rahul.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I'd ask everybody's patience for what is going to be a little bit longer in terms of a governance report today. It underscores the importance and the attention that we gave to these matters. So I'm looking forward to sharing this with you. Now, the Governance Committee met yesterday and had a very robust discussion about Metrolinx's decision-making practices and our continuous commitment to good governance. Now, just a little bit of background to start with. Now, under the Metrolinx Act itself, only a few matters require consideration at public board meetings. They are amending the Regional Transportation Plan, receiving the annual report, or changing Metrolinx's fare bylaw for transit services. But the good news is that Metrolinx already exceeds the requirements of its legislation by doing a number of things. First of all, having quarterly public meetings, broadcasting those meetings over the web, receiving and distributing correspondence from the public to all board members for assessment and discussion, as you heard a little bit earlier from our chair, and making meeting reports and correspondence available to the public, and making final decisions public, either at public meetings or afterwards, through public announcements, contract awards, etc. Now, we're still committed to continuous improvement of our governance practices and enhancements which support our commitment to public service. So following yesterday's Governance Committee discussion, the committee is recommending the board take several additional steps that I'm going to outline for you. First of all, we're going to continue to build a governance section on the Metrolinx website to make key governance documents available to the public. Now, the type of documents we're talking about include the board charter and code of conduct, the standing committee terms of reference, so you understand what all the committee work is about, as well as the board's conflict of interest policy, a core document in any governance system. Now, committing to a policy of making business cases publicly available before any board-related decisions is also key. So those BCAs will be made public in advance. We'll also be incorporating a public meeting component to each of the scheduled board meetings. Note, the meeting topics to be addressed in camera will be determined by the board chair in consultation with management, as is the case. And starting in January, we're going to be providing 5 business days public notice of board meetings, unless unusual circumstances exist such as special meetings called on short notice or for confidential matters. Where notice in advance is not possible, the public will be advised of the meeting as soon as possible afterwards. We'll also be posting board agendas and public reports within that 5-day notice period. And we'll be posting meeting minutes within 30 days of their approval by the board, redacted as appropriate to protect confidentiality, personal information, etc. And staff are currently reviewing the 2017 board meeting minutes approved to date and are expecting to post these online by January 30th, 2018. And continuing this as well, it's important that our board governance practices are aligned with practices of management as well. And as you can hear earlier from Phil's remarks, things such as the town hall are going to enhance these practices by more transparency with the public. And Chair, that's my report from the Governance Committee.
Good job. Thank you. Does anybody, you've all heard various discussions of this. Does anybody have any questions of Rahul? You don't need a motion on any of that, do you? It's just, that's what we're
All
doing?
been done at the committee. It'll be done.
It'll just be implemented?
That's right.
No questions?
Excellent summary.
Yeah, well done.
Great initiative.
Thank you, Rahul. That brings us to the next item on the agenda, which is Presto Privacy Review. Mary Martin's name's on the list, but
But I'm going to
she's
call
delegating it
Taylor.
to Alba again to present this. Alba, we've got your report. This is important. Bring us up to date on how your thinking's evolved and where we've landed.
Thank you. It's taken some time to get here, but I think it's been good time spent reviewing practices of other industries and speaking with the Information and Privacy Commissioner, and also engaging in public consultation and in consultation with experts in the industry. So in June was when we committed to reviewing our privacy practices for how we respond to law enforcement requests for Presto information. And in September, we provided an update, including our consultation plan. We reviewed the policies and protocols of other transit agencies, telecommunication companies, and the banks, and that helped us identify some potential changes to how we respond to those requests, how we communicate to our customers about our policy, and how we report on the information we share with law enforcement, something we haven't done to date. From that, we went out and asked others what they thought about our potential changes. So we had a document up on Metrolinx Engage for public comment from October 10th to November 3rd. And we told everyone it was there by sending out emails to registered users, to the Presto e-panel, and also through social media. And 256 individuals responded to that request and provided their comments. On October 20th, we also had a facilitated session with privacy advocates, experts, transit agency representatives, and law enforcement. This was a highly engaged and interesting session that yielded recommendations that, interestingly, aligned with a lot of the stuff we heard from the comments received online. So taking into account those consultations and those comments, we made further revisions to our policy and our protocols, and those are before you today for review and approval. We also engaged the Information and Privacy Commissioner through our process, and they've committed to responding to our request for review within the next few weeks. Provided their recommendations are minor in nature, we're asking the board for authority to proceed to implement what we've proposed in our report. However, should the IPC come back with something different than what we've proposed, we can always come back to the board in February 2018, which is when we propose to bring our first statistical report on law enforcement requests received. So what did we change based on our consultations? Well, these are in the report, but I think the most substantive change relates to our description of when we will typically require a court order before we release Presto information. And this will occur more than likely where the incident giving rise to the request is not related to our transit system or to our services, or where the request relates to information from multiple cards or accounts, or if the request relates to a lengthy period of time. Why can't we be clearer on requiring a warrant in all of those cases? It's because we can't envision all of the combinations and permutations of requests we may have. In fact, I had a recent request this week where we were able to obtain the consent of the victim in order to provide the information requested by law enforcement. In our protocol revisions, we've also proposed some additional kind of oversight, and that is to require 2 signatures on the requesting agency side. And we also require review and legal approval by Metrolinx's privacy office or legal counsel before any information is disclosed. And also, we are seeking to notify individuals about their disclosure of information where we are able to do so. And finally, we've proposed an annual report that will provide information on how many requests we've received from whom, how many times the requested information was provided, and what kind of information is generally provided. And our first report will be presented in February. We hope everyone will see how their comments were reflected in our proposed revisions. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Good presentation. Very good. Good job.
Thank you.
Nicely spoken. I'm sure there'll be a number of questions. Janet's first.
Yeah, I think, just to echo, I think you've done a really good job sort of trying to balance a really challenging area. But let me ask, and I had 3 questions. And is there too much red tape in this in urgent, emergent situations? Because a couple of times you go through this, and you talk about, in one area, you're talking about requiring a form be filled out, even in emergency situations. Now, I don't know, I mean, as you say, it's hard to envision, but do we have the right balance in this, where if it is actually urgent, that we're able to make the decision and pay the price if we guess wrong afterwards or whatever, but making sure that we're responding urgently when we need to be urgently. And the corollary of that is, have we set up our teams, staff, in terms of holidays, weekends, because that's usually when these things always happen. So that was the first kind of thing. Are we still, with this policy, able to respond quickly when we need to be responding really, really quickly?
My answer to that is yes, I think so, based on our experience to date. It's myself or another individual that respond on weekends when those calls come in. We call law enforcement typically immediately. The calls typically come into the Presto Contact Center, who sends out an email to one of 2 individuals, myself as one. We verify the request with law enforcement. We send them the form, but in the meantime, I will ask my Presto colleagues to start the request. This is for missing people typically. So they've already got the ball rolling, and I wait for that form to come back before I release information. Sometimes, unfortunately, we can't help and we don't have any information. And so we provide that information immediately.
Okay. Okay. Some of the wording indicated that it was just sort of police as opposed to, because in I think there was one case here, it said something about law enforcement and then it was changed to just be police or somewhere. Anyway, this is like the RCMP, for example, for the sake of argument, would be able to access through our appropriate system if they needed it.
Well, they would only be able to access it through a written request where we would provide them with whatever the response is.
Yeah, but we're not limiting this to.
No, what the limitation was intended to do was to remove others by law enforcement, for example, or municipal kind of enforcement. It's clear that this is, special constables, transit safety, or police.
Police being OPP, Toronto area plus RCMP,
Yes.
but not just any, as you say, by law enforcement officer working for Durham.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. And we've got special communication in place, obviously, to law enforcement agencies about what the process will be, so they know in advance, so they don't get caught up in.
Yeah, we tend to have the same individuals contacting us, so they're quite familiar with the process.
Thank you very much.
Kathy?
Yeah, I actually want to pick up on that because I was wondering about the safety issue off premises and how quickly we'd be able to respond. So my comment to Janet's question would be, given that we're going to be reporting on a regular basis and reflecting on what our experiences are, that we remain flexible associated with the kinds of changes that may be required as we experience how this is all coming out. My question is, based on all the feedback, and it was very robust in terms of your outreach, is there anything in your mind going into these changes that remains substantially controversial, based on what you had heard from your various constituents?
Yeah, certainly. What remains controversial is the not requiring a warrant in every case.
In every case, okay. Thank you.
I think the key issue is that balance, very clearly, as Janet asked, about the balance, the operational flexibility, but then also proper sign-off. And I think, Albert, we'll continuously look at that, isn't it? Because, for you or someone else to always be on hand over weekends to respond to stuff, we just need to think about practical measures that allows us to achieve the right degree of scrutiny of a request, but also the quickest possible response, because these are serious issues.
So as you know, Alba, I'd be nervous that we're not being strict enough, as opposed to too restrictive, that the issues of privacy are paramount, and respect for individuals, and there are proper legal processes for getting access to information, and requiring those processes to be followed is not an unreasonable position. You're persuaded those legal processes are too slow to meet the needs of our passengers, to insist on some form of warrant in all cases?
I'll give you the example.
That's why, as you know, that was my starting point, is I assume is that the case for cell phone information, for example, with Rogers or Bell or TELUS, that if any request for cell phone information requires a warrant?
Yes, that is their position.
Right.
In our case, however, I think we have circumstances where we have complainants or victims that approach our transit safety officers. And so this allows our transit safety officers to work with the victim and police to prosecute an offense if there's been an incident on one of our systems. So most of the disclosures that happen to law enforcement that are voluntary without a warrant are victim-based or complainant-based. And I liken them to, if a bank is robbed, the bank will hand over whatever evidence they have to prosecute the robbery. So that's why the distinction between incidents that occur on a transit system versus those that occur outside of the transit system.
And that is the very important difference. When there's an incident off the transit system, it
Requires a warrant.
Requires a warrant then, yeah.
because that's more like a traditional
Exactly.
So what's a typical case where, in your mind, where there will not be a warrant required? I just want to make sure I have a feel for, give us a couple of fact situations that you see on a recurring basis.
Like, hopefully not on a recurring basis, assaults.
Missing person.
So just take me through the assault case. One of our riders is assaulted by another person on the train?
Yeah, or sexual offenders, yes.
And then what is what are you looking for in the Presto information to assist? What is the request that then comes from law enforcement to help protect that rider who's being assaulted?
If they are able to link the individual who committed the assault to a time when they tapped on the bus, we can track that time to the card and then look in the other database that links the card to a name if the card is registered, and provide the name and information of the person to whom that card was registered.
Yeah, I'm being thick. I still don't quite get the fact situation. Assault takes place. Our people don't know who the individual is. The person's run away. How do you link it to a particular Presto card?
The victim may say, the person who assaulted me tapped on right after I got on the bus. So we'll know when they tapped on, and then we can find out when the individual who tapped on after them.
So we might provide 10 names at that point out of the database?
It depends on the time period and how close we can get. If only 2 people tapped on at the time, we'll have the victim and the other offender. If more than 2 have tapped on, it's very fact-specific. We really have to look at the circumstances. And we might look at the name of the registered users and say, well, you've alleged that the assailant is a male. 3 of these names are females. We won't provide you with those names. I'll give you another example. We had a bus driver who was assaulted by someone who tapped on. We knew clearly.
That's an easy one.
Yeah.
Right?
Another example would be missing persons,
Yes.
for example. And that's,
And we're looking to see, has that person tapped on anywhere in the system?
Yeah.
Those I get.
yeah.
You're pretty convinced this is, in the balance of things, you're putting privacy, a heavier thumb on the side of privacy than previously
Yes.
under our policy, and you think you're putting it on heavily enough on privacy, but without undermining the interests of our passengers in terms of safety and protection.
Yeah, it's a difficult challenge. It is still before the Information and Privacy Commissioner for their review, and so they're still reviewing.
And the motion is you implement this with minor editorial changes. If the Privacy Commissioner says you've done a good job,
Yes.
if the Privacy Commissioner raises questions, urges you to reconsider anything,
Yes.
you'll bring it back to the February board meeting.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Bob, just to add to that, I think you also get the side benefits of additional transparency
Yes.
and additional consistency so that the public knows what are the rules by which we'll operate on a consistent and standard basis, where there may have been some confusion and maybe some inconsistent application in the past as well.
Correct. And I think the reporting will also help demonstrate how much of an interest there is in this information, how many times it's actually provided, and whether it's even useful.
How about that reporting? Will that break it down in terms of the nature of the incident or request as well, in terms of missing person or others, or?
It'll give a general sense of those. We don't want to provide information that would compromise an ongoing investigation, for example, but it will give a general indication of the information that's been provided and who has requested it.
So we can't identify the quantum because there may have been a sense that this is widespread as opposed to, I think the reporting was around 15 to 20 incidents over the course of a year.
Yeah, it's more specific to the kinds of incidents for which it's requested.
Bonnie? And then Carl?
This is a bit of a follow-up on Upkar's question. In the appendix, there was a proposal around reporting, and a question was posed about, would we add anything to change, or is the reporting process in any way? So you've answered the question about would we, when the data gets reported, we would understand a general nature of what it was we were seeing. But where does this and how would it get reported? Is this something that would come forward to the board before it was then, posted publicly? Or could you just elaborate a little bit on that?
I think we envision a public report at the February board session, which will have those statistics in it.
Okay, so in a public session of the board, so, okay. Thank you.
Carl?
Thank you. And the motion references that the effective, it doesn't say specifically when the effective date is. It talks about the first report in February of 2018. Is this to be effective today, when approved by the board, subject to the Information and Privacy Commissioner, or can we do it as it is now?
While we're waiting for the IPC's input, I suppose we should finalize, see what those comments are before we make it effective, but I can tell you some of these practices are already in place. The requirement to complete a form, the logging, the additional oversight from the Privacy Office and Legal Counsel, a lot of those elements are already in place,
So this
but
is
revising the,
documenting the current practice in effect.
I'm sorry?
It's documenting the current practice in effect.
Yeah, we started making the changes almost immediately.
Okay, so I don't know if it, for clarity, whether or not an effective date should be included in the resolution then or not. I'll leave that to you.
I think that's not a bad idea. We're actually expecting to hear from the IPC by the end of December, so it won't be much longer. We could say effective January 1st.
I think that's a good suggestion.
I think it's a good idea.
Right.
Thanks.
Any other comments? You're very persuasive,
Thank you.
very credible, very straightforward. You thought hard about it, and the fact you're on this 24/7 is very impressive too. Who's the other member of your department who's makes these calls?
Christine Taylor, who works in Presto, actually is
Is
my
the other
colleague
person
on
who
this,
makes that.
and Haley Haw, who's one of our associates.
And can they wake you up, and do they have the right to call you and wake you up if necessary?
Unfortunately,
For an
yes.
urgent matter?
Yes, yes.
They do?
Yes, they do, yeah.
That's very
After
good.
they've tried you first.
That's very good. I'm very impressed. Who would like to move this? Carl, since you amended, why don't you do it? And Upcar, why don't you second it? Is there any further question or discussion on the point? All in favor? Any dissent? Great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alba.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Alba. Well done.
Really well done. That brings us to the hydrogen technology analysis. Peter Zuck is going to lead us on this item.
Chair, I wonder if I might bring to the table the two domain experts who worked on this.
Please,
and
please.
whose work we're looking at today, in case I screw up.
No,
Or there are any questions from the board.
I think it's essential they come. Yes, almost guaranteed there are going to be questions.
Almost guaranteed.
Drill deeper than Peter's expertise. Just introduce your two colleagues, please.
I have Ian Sutherland, who worked on
Introduce
Hydrail
themselves.
to my right, and I have Duncan Mills, who is deep at the table in the DBFOM,
Got it.
which is the next presentation.
Why don't you give us 1 minute each on your own backgrounds as it relates to hydrogen?
Yeah, sure. So I work for CH2M, and I've been involved in this feasibility study since the end of May this year. Taking through the feasibility study to the point where we're virtually complete on that now and ready to submit the findings to Metrolinx.
And are you an engineer, or what's your disciplinary background?
So my original background is civil engineering, then structural engineering, construction management, and project management.
I'm Duncan Mills with CH2M. I've been working with Metrolinx on the Rapid Transit programme since 2012 and now on the RER programme since 2016. And I've been working on railways for the last 20 years in the commercial and in the commercial space and procurement space, and have been supporting Metrolinx on the DBFOM procurement since September 2016.
Over to you, Peter.
So, as you know, we're studying the technical and economic feasibility of implementing hydrogen. The study has created an overall system design that includes hydrogen fuel cell powered trains, refueling facilities, storage facilities, and hydrogen production. The electricity required for hydrogen production would be drawn from the grid at nighttime, where there's a surplus here in Ontario. We're also engaged with rail vehicle manufacturers to study how a hydrogen fuel study system could be integrated into our EMU types of trains. This will help inform the feasibility assessment. As Phil indicated, we held a one-day, highly successful hydrogen symposium on November 16th, keeping our commitment to do so, which explored governmental leadership on this technology, economic development and energy market considerations, case studies of where this has been attempted to be implemented in other places, and the importance of communication to the public on all of the above. The scope, as you will recall, of our study has a number of work streams. The first of them is the hydrogen feasibility project, which I just described. The second is the high-level EMU concept design, where we are actually embarked on engaging a designer of an EMU train. And then finally, the Hydrail Symposium project, which we can tick the box, was successfully completed.
Did you feel on that it was a balanced set of presentations? My own reaction was we had far more champions of hydrogen than critics. We had some of both, but I thought it was overweight of the champions. Were you persuaded we heard all the reservations that we should have heard, as well as all the good arguments?
I would agree with the chair that a symposium really encourages people who are enthusiasts and who actually have very enthusiastic and some, interesting voices to bring to the table to be present. But be assured that we had our skeptics in the room because in order to make a good decision on this, we need to have a balanced view. So I was very pleased because I think it is important to give a full hearing to the technology. It's also important to understand that the technology is about more than our present-day problems. This is something that could have a life long after things that we're doing now. So I'm persuaded that while we had an enthusiastic audience for the symposium, we have a balanced view going forward.
And yourself, what are your views on that?
Look, I mean, the objective of the symposium was to learn more about global views on the Hydrail concept and what is happening, in reality in terms of taking that forward. In terms of the feasibility study that we're looking at, we are very conscious that there are, areas that need to be explored in more detail. There are areas where you can challenge the detail of it, and we are very conscious of that. And the feasibility study itself is focusing on being able to explore those areas and provide, a balanced response to it.
Such as the issues on commerciality and commercial availability of the application, and so that'll all shine out in
the technology itself, and the challenges of integrating the fuel cell technology into rail vehicles, the interface between the whole system and the electricity grid. All of that, we understand, it's not, something that can be just sort of immediately, recognised as being something that's straightforward. It requires a considerable amount of analysis, and we understand the questions that people are asking about how can you do this? Isn't this, innovative technology? And the answers to that is yes. There are challenges there, and we recognise that in the report.
And did you find the symposium helped you and helped us to formulate that feasibility study further?
Certainly, and particularly the session we had at the end, which was an open session where we wanted everyone who was in the room to give us their views. So I think that is particularly where the balance of views came out. The presentations, yes, were largely from people who were involved in the hydrogen industry, but the views of the whole audience that were there have been recognised and have been recorded, and their understanding of where there are questions and concerns is in the feasibility study report.
And the feasibility study report is a written document from you?
That's correct.
Of considerable substance, I take it?
That's correct, yes.
And when will we receive that?
So we're finishing that for the end of this year. I mean, the bulk of the analysis is complete, and we're pretty much in that sort of editorial end game of it. So the intention is that it's completed, by the end of December.
Completed by the end of December, delivered to us for us to look at and to share our results with you at the appropriate time.
And it'll also become a public document.
Yes.
thereafter.
And you would expect it to become public documents around the February board meeting, probably? Is that the sort of timing you're thinking?
That's where we are, yes.
Got it. I've got a list of people who'd like to jump in, and I know you're not finished the
It's okay.
presentation yet. We're on the symposium part right now.
Okay.
Brian, then Ann, then Carl.
Thank you, and I had the opportunity to attend the symposium and found it very interesting. I found it particularly interesting that a lot of the presenters were not in the rail business. They were in businesses that would like to see hydrogen be available, and some of them were very overt in linking the importance of having, if I could call it, a major customer commit to hydrogen, because that may boost the hydrogen enterprise province-wide, particularly supply of hydrogen. One thing that wasn't discussed as much as I had anticipated at the seminar were safety concerns. Some of us in the room remember the Hindenburg.
Yes, we do.
Some may not. But I wondered if in our technical study, and I look forward to seeing it, will that be addressed specifically?
Yes, absolutely. Safety is obviously with railways is the absolutely number one priority. And we're very conscious of, the potential for hydrogen to, to be considered as something that is unsafe. And therefore the whole design of the end-to-end system, because we're not just talking about rail vehicles, we're talking about an end-to-end system. That whole design, in terms of the consideration of safety, will have safety as its top priority. And in taking that forward, we have engaged with Transport Canada as part of the feasibility study, and in addition to that, we have understood all of the existing rules, regulations, codes, standards that apply to the use of hydrogen, the production of hydrogen, its storage, its transportation, and its use. And yes, we've identified that in a rail context, there is a gap there because this is a new application, and therefore we have begun that engagement with Transport Canada to work with them in terms of understanding exactly what gaps need to be filled in order to be able to create the applicable regulations that would be required for a rail vehicle.
Got Ann, Carl, and Bonnie on, still on the symposium. And related questions, because there's still two parts of the presentation to come. So you can stay on the speakers list. You can come in now or be top of the next list.
This may be because I'm a little bit patience impaired, but I don't want to jump the gun on the next part of the reservation, on the presentation, but I do have a question that arises from the emerging themes of the symposium, so I'll hang it on that. On page 11 of your presentation, I just couldn't get past one theme, which said, to date, no jurisdiction has implemented hydrol on a locomotive or bi-level carriage that would be compatible with RER. And I guess my question is, no matter what you study in terms of the feasibility, how do you get past? To me, that was a bit of a road stopper right there.
Well, from that page, and since we, there's two messages on that page. One is a lot of governments and systems are looking at this, and two was the one that you raised, that no jurisdictions that implemented it.
To me, that was a showstopper.
It is definitely a stopper, and the point is that in a railway system, because of the complexity of the system, we want proven technologies before we're going to put something to work, because there's too much risk associated with not doing that. So we are here in what I'd call the research and development mode. It is worth being in the research and development mode. Metrolinx was in the research and development mode a decade ago about hydrogen, and someday this will be something where it will be a proven technology that we will be wanting to be put in our suite. So without prejudging anything, that is a piece that we thought was important for the board to hear, that to date no jurisdiction has successfully implemented the system on the scale we need it.
But what's important to understand is that the way we are going to market on the DBFOM procurement is to have an agnostic view on whether the propulsion, electrical propulsion is provided through catenary systems and or hydrogen. I think what we're doing here is in a very short period of time, we are pushing really hard to see what is possible from a hydrogen solution, because in its essence, we spend a fortune on erecting a catenary-based system, which if hydrogen takes off in 10, 15 years' time, could leave us with, in effect, stranded assets and investment, which has an environmental aspect to it, which is going in corridors where our communities live and are sensitive to. So what we're doing is we're pushing the hydrogen debate along as quickly as possible. We're building a pilot loco even to see if it's feasible and possible. But in the end, in next year, when we go to market, we're saying to the market out there, you bear the risk of the solution you are implementing. That includes the rolling stock and equipment risk as well as the infrastructure risk. So if the market is willing to offer a solution where they save money by not putting catenary systems in and put a hydrogen proposal forward that's feasible and which will scrutinize, that is a feasible option, which we will consider. So this is interesting times. This is very exciting times. And but you're is exactly right. We want to be really transparent that for our rail application, this has not been implemented before, but we're not closing the door on it.
Carl?
Thanks very much. I had the opportunity as well to be at the symposium, and I really appreciated the discussion that went on. It certainly gave more information to me and understanding, which was just about zero when I went in. So, which reminds me of the phrase, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. So I'm looking at the slide that's on the screen right now, and in terms of the business case, this is one of the components of the report that you'll be presenting come February.
Yes.
Thereabouts. So is this business case, then that would be the first BC that would be presented publicly and prior to making any decision that Rahul was referring to earlier?
It won't be a business case, it'll be a feasibility study.
I'm looking at the slide which says a business case. Number 4.
It will include indications of the market case for hydrogen. Perhaps you could elaborate. But it's not going to be a business case in the sense of a Metrolinx. This is a project we're embarking upon, and this is the benefits, and this is the business case. It is more the economic feasibility business case type of analysis.
So, apologies, Carl. So, in context of our business cases for application of projects, this is not a project business case for Metrolinx. So this will be sort of the case for what is the cost benefits type of considerations.
Exactly. You know, so as part of the feasibility study, we've obviously been determining what the capital cost and the operating cost of the system would be, and therefore we've used the existing business case model for RER and extracted out of that costs relating to the overhead electrification and plugged in the costs for hydro to give a comparison between the two.
Okay, so it's good to have that clarification, because this is not the same kind of thing that was referred to earlier in terms of making information available on an open basis. Okay.
My question is just related to the 4 topics. Is there any kind of a scan of the research and development that is taking place on this around the world, and in actual fact where the hub of it might be located that had direct relevancy to rail? Is that likely to be included in the feasibility information?
I could give you a short answer. Germany is the place where this has been most developed through persistent government efforts over a decade. There is actually a center of excellence for knowledge about hydrogen right here in Toronto with a government-sponsored laboratory, which has been engaged as part of this process.
So
But the feasibility study report will canvass the state of play
That's what I was
Yes.
asking about.
Absolutely.
Not just in what we know then related to Germany and that particular center here
Right.
in Ontario. Okay, thank you.
This has been a global overview of hydrogen fuel cell type technologies, and also the application of those technologies in various aspects, whether it's transport aspects or other aspects of it. And we've picked up both the industry side of it and also the research side of it as well.
That's good.
Back to the presentation.
So I will trot through and try not to cover any ground we've already covered, but on this slide, we have the scale of the study we'll receive, the configuration of a system, the scale, how it could be implemented and operated, and as well, some discussion of the business benefits of hydrogen. The next slide shows that this is a big undertaking, that if you were to go the direction, even partially, of implementing a hydrogen solution, it affects every aspect of the delivery of our services, right from power generation, electrical distribution, the production of hydrogen, storing it, distributing it, how we'd refuel trains, dispensing it, and all of the other aspects of the operation of our system. With the early findings, we had some discussion on that. We will, in February, have a more fulsome discussion. The electric portion, this really just shows how hydro would affect.
Just before you jump over the slide you left, it says this is equivalent to about 1% of the power that's produced in Ontario every day on average. That's
Yes.
the amount of electricity necessary to produce the hydrogen necessary for these purposes. Assume we go with a catenary system, direct drive electric with a catenary, what percentage of the power that's produced in Ontario will be used by that system? I didn't have a sense of whether 1% is a lot or a little relative to the alternative.
The way that a hydro system would operate is it does use a lot more electricity than the overhead catenary system, because there are inefficiencies as you produce the hydrogen and then as you turn it back into electricity. So my understanding is that it's about a 2.5 to 1 ratio, so that there would be that equivalent difference.
So this says, the implication of that, I think, is that an electrocatenary system for RER would use about 0.4 of 1% of Ontario electricity production each day.
Yes, and the big difference is when you're drawing.
Yes, I get it. You're shifting it to a time when the stuff's being wasted, potentially being wasted, but it's also, but in terms of relative volumes, 0.4 versus 1%. Janet?
This is probably a really, really dumb question, but I'm hearing you say that this actually is using more electricity overall
Yes.
than
2.5
the
times.
electricity system. So what's our net benefit, the environment, whatever? I mean, to me, we're not reducing energy use, we're increasing energy use, if I can.
So, Jana, that's a really good question. And this whole energy use to create hydrogen, that's always been the conundrum with these types of proposals. And when we bring the feasibility study, the sort of the magic zone for this to work, if there is one, is the fact that we have quite a lot of electrical energy generation that is continuously generating, but at the middle of the night, there's no users for it.
But someday, and again, this may be a very, very silly wish, but someday Ontario's energy policy might yet become a little more feasible and rational for the province. So that may not always be the circumstance either.
Absolutely right. And therefore, if we ever get to a stage where we are going to evaluate the business case for that, it needs to have that longer-term future energy usage look in mind, and we can't do a cost-benefit analysis that just assumes that the lower cost of energy at midnight will be there perpetually. So there's a lot of moving parts to this discussion, but currently that viability hinges on the fact that at midnight and early hours of the morning, there aren't any users or any takers or any buyers of that energy currently.
Just to clarify, I mean, we've worked very closely with IESO on this project, and so they have provided us with their forecast of electricity prices going out from the beginning of this potential service all the way through for the next 40 years. And that still recognises that there is a surplus of electricity in the nighttime hours, and that's because the way that Ontario's electricity generation system operates is largely dominated by nuclear and hydro electricity generation. So
Does nuclear generate continuously at 24/7?
Yes. Yes.
So that's why there's always going to be a lot of power at night, given we have 50% of our system is.
60%. Yes.
That's
Yeah,
your
that's
base,
correct.
that's your base power system, and you can't flip those on and off like you do gas fired.
So if nighttime demand's only 25% of province capacity, that means there is 25% available basically at no cost, at very low cost.
That's correct.
However, in a 40-year view, it may be the case that the power we produce at nighttime isn't not valuable somewhere, and it might, so we would have to give a much different rigor to the business case to actually do this than taking a 40-year view for feasibility.
So never has the phrase evidence-based decision-making been more useful.
Peter, sprint to the finish line.
I'm going to sprint to the finish. We talked about the EMU concept design. Suffice it to know that we are in that process. The RFP closed in November, and we're working in that concept design process. We had to talk about the symposium. You have evidence of those who participated today, that it was successful, it kept its promise, and we gathered useful information in that process. We have discussed, slide 11, two key points here are, people are looking at this, but to date, no jurisdiction has succeeded in implementing this on the scale that we will need it. And thank you very much, and thank you very much, Ian, for your enriching this presentation.
Cool. Sorry, Phil, did you want to?
Yeah, just before we didn't mention the presentation where we are with the RFP on the pilot locomotive. Ian, can you give us just a quick heads up and the board where that is?
Yeah, so the intention is that is submitted out to an open market before Christmas, and I've targeted the team to achieve that on the 14th of December.
So that's when the RFP will go out, and then we get bidders to come back, and then we're going to build a pilot loco.
Well, we're going to design one first, so, you know.
Yeah. That's normally the first step.
Usually helps.
Thank you very much, Ian.
It's great to have the expert here.
So my question's probably more suited for Phil on this one. The nub of the question is how long do we have to make a decision on this versus catenary? So can you situate this feasibility study within sort of the timeline of the decision-making process for the board?
So when we go out for the RFQ in March, the RFQ will be agnostic towards the technology that's used for creating the electrical power propulsion. Late on, when we get to the fall of next year, we will have our shortlist of bidders for the DBFOM, where we'll produce the RFP, which would then take anything between 12 and 18 months to complete, and during that period, there will be decisions by the market. So what's really important about this question is our decision will be very dependent on what the market comes back with. Everything we are doing here are enabling and are positioning and are sort of exploring and lifting the debate so that the market can see, firstly, that it's our interest, that all options are considered, and secondly, it is our intent that the market considers this as an option to bid against. It's not a commitment, and we're not going to write provisionally. I'll say this now very, very cautiously. I don't foresee us writing a requirement for it to be a hydrogen-based system in our specification. Our intention is that the market evaluate the risk profile, build as well as operate, and come back with a proposal to us.
Quick follow-up to that. If we were to issue the RFP today, how many parties would be able to respond to that from a hydrail and a catenary perspective? Like, how many players are out there right now?
There'll be a small group that'll be able to respond hydrail. There'll be a large group that'll be able to respond conventional catenary systems.
Small, less than a handful on the hydrail side, right?
And none of them who are running a system
of the size that we.
We basically have 18 months to 2 years to sort of wrestle this and watch what happens with the market.
Exactly right.
Mary Ann?
And given that, I mean, I think what I've heard sounds reasonably conclusive in terms of which way we would be going.
Which way did you hear it?
Well, that we probably wouldn't be in a position to embrace the hydrogen fuel cell strategy. And I just, and the other option is the catenary. And are we putting an equal amount of investigation and time into the catenary system so that we actually evolve it to a kind of a finer stage? I'd just like to be, because it seems like I can understand from an R&D and the province's support of this, but the reality I'd just like to make sure that we've also balanced this with a strong position relative to the category, because it has all kinds of implications, as we know, just the study is going on with that intensity that we're providing here.
Phil?
Yeah, so we're most definitely focusing on getting our very clear statement of outputs that we require from the DBFOM bidders that really clearly covers conventional technologies as well as leave the door open for a novel technology such as hydrogen to be offered. So I wouldn't go so far as to say that at this stage we are sort of having made up our mind. We haven't. We absolutely haven't, because there could be, depending on what the market is willing to step up to, there could be huge momentum in the next couple of years in hydrogen, and there could be that organizations, and I wouldn't want to mention the names here, but there's at least one manufacturing organization where the president of that organization has committed publicly that hydrogen-driven rolling stock is an absolute objective of that organization within the next years. So this is more than just a twinkle in the industry's eye. This is something that can potentially have the momentum, and who knows what the market is willing to offer and bid in the next 2 years. So I wouldn't preclude this at all. I think there's a real possibility. There's going to be a really intense and careful evaluation of such opportunities, but we are not neglecting conventional technology in our specification at all.
And our advancement in our thinking about how the catenary system might work and the aesthetics of it, and
absolutely.
The implications in terms of, I mean, part of it is what it does to, how it damages the public realm in a sense.
How it affects
How it
the
affects,
public realm, yeah.
So just thinking through that.
Yeah, definitely part of our overall specification process.
Thank you very much. That's the best presentation we've had on this yet. All three of you. Terrific. Thank you very much. Let's go on to item number 10, RER On-Corridor Works Procurement Strategy. Peter Zuck again.
This is where we get to Duncan's world, if you want to ask him questions. And I will go to slide. So I'm going to start here with why the design, build, finance, operate, and maintain delivery model. It's a long slide here that talks about a lot of things. We can reduce that to one simple concept, that we eliminate through a DBFOM the integration risk that we have experienced on other projects here at Metrolinx, placing those integration risks with one consortium who is responsible to deliver on infrastructure, rolling stock, control systems, maintenance regimes, operations plans. It puts those decisions with the DBFOM consortium, and it is a model that has been used successfully on railway projects elsewhere in the world, and including it in Canada. Its benefits, again, this slide is a restatement of how the DBFOM manages the integration risk. The next important thing to, yeah.
Before we
Okay.
move on, if I can. Just back on that, the question I had when I read that was, is this becoming the dominant form of approach? You're saying it exists globally. Is it becoming the dominant?
I would say,
yeah, no.
No?
No. When you go to other jurisdictions, there are different ways. That this whole delivery of capital programs are approached. When you are when you have a mature network infrastructure and you are adding additions or enhancements to that system, you have a very high proportion of very busy operations that happen on a continuous basis. And so typically in the United Kingdom, for example, you will not have DBFOM type structures on the operational railway. You'd have those DBFOM models of procurement mostly in self-contained separate railways, such as Docklands Light Rail, or if you build a new greenfield type railway, because you have less of that engagement of existing operations. So the model in those jurisdictions are often one of alliances where the incumbent authority partners up with designers and builders, and that the risk-sharing mechanism is different because there's so much operational risk on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, I should have clarified my question. When you're in such a significant new build,
As we are
that
now.
becoming dominant.
It is the dominant method,
I should
yeah.
have clarified.
Yeah, yeah. So in our type of scenario where we have this significant package, you'll go across, you go to places like Denver and wherever, and you'll see that the DBFOM model is the preferred model.
Back to you, Peter.
So in the interest of time, I've kind of gone to the question about what the benefits, we've covered that, that's in the slides. Now, what does that leave to Metrolinx? And I think that's an important issue because it leaves with us the important things of us dealing with our customers, the customer-facing staff, the fair retailing and collection, and customer communications. So we will still be running our railway. We will be running it with a highly accountable DBFOM consortium supplying everything of trains to the platform side.
Rob, can I just a quick point of clarification? Because I recall we had a full discussion on this at the board and the explanation of why we were moving to this particular model. Is there a different objective in today? In reading through the package, I made note that other countries are doing it. Is there an objective? I didn't understand the objective of this particular.
Well, it is to restate this, and also to restate it in a public forum. We're in the public meeting now, and this, I don't believe this has had
No,
yet
we are also,
a fulsome discussion.
proceeding. We also want to give the board an update because we are proceeding now to to go to Treasury Board with proposals and getting formal government sign-off on where we're at.
Thank you.
So Metrolinx and Infrastructure Ontario are doing market soundings and have been engaged in that since 2016. In advance of commencing the formal process, we're going to be conducting further market soundings with interested organizations in January to gather feedback on the potential structure and key project issues of our DBFOM. That's going to include our Chief Executive Officer and the Chief Executive Officer of Infrastructure Ontario traveling to places where we might engage these consortia to make sure that we get the message out of how serious we are about going forth with this procurement. The schedule we're working to is a very aggressive schedule of the RFQ release in the spring of 2018, RFP release in the fall of 2018, RFP submissions in the fall of 2019, with a contract award in the first quarter of 2020.
To be completed by? The contract to be completed?
The contract to go,
In terms of getting...
be awarded and go to financial close early 2020.
And our objective clearly is to aim for 2024. It'll be very dependent on what the market comes back with, but we think that that's a reasonable build period. And in final analysis, what the market can deliver in terms of the design, the delivery, construction, and construction methodology will really depend on what they bid. But we're still on track for that 2024, 2025 timeline.
As the unread pages of the presentation state, we maintain our RER time goals. Those will be clearly stated to the market. The market will tell us something about those goals and the feasibility costs and issues involved in delivering them, but we still feel confident that we can meet that publicly stated objective.
And does the successful bidder take over operations when the build is completed or during the build? Or is that an open question?
It's an open question. It will be phased, And what's really exciting is that Greg Percy on our side is now leading a transformation program that'll plot out the program for when we transfer the operations from the current contracts we've got to the new contracts we will have. So it will be, the phasing doesn't have to coincide with the handover of the infrastructure substantial completion, but it'll be phased as one program.
Thank you. Rahul?
So I want to go back to Kathy's question, and it's probably best for Phil in this one. And I don't want to speak your answer to talk about what we're going to do at Metrolinx, but in the context of the DBFOM, what we're paying for is the offlay of that risk, right? So when you start to think about, even in the UK and other places, what's the range of the premium that companies or we would be paying for that risk?
So I'm not going to fully answer that question because I don't want the market to know what we're thinking.
So just give me an example.
Yeah. So one of the biggest challenges with figuring for the market to figure out in terms of a risk profile, which will affect the range significantly, is the taking on of existing assets. Because when you think of track, we call it a linear asset because it's not a fixed asset. It's sort of a fixed asset, but it's linear. It has different configurations, different shape, different conditions every 10 meters. So taking that on and guaranteeing a performance level based on an asset which you may not know what exactly the condition is a real challenge. That's why we've had such a very proactive program to do an asset management database and the like. But one of the options that we are currently thinking and considering would be to what extent do we want to hand over assets like that in a longer term, on a longer term basis? Because this is about transferring risk, but it's also about transferring risk to the parties that are best equipped to manage the risk. And it may be that in the types of options we put forward in RFQ, and I don't want to preclude anything, but be perfectly public about it, is we're going to listen very carefully to the market in the market consultation, hear what the market thinks and feels about the risk profiles, and then we're going to structure the RFQ and the RFP to allow us to come up with a value for money bid and not a disproportionate risk premium based on existing assets.
Brian A. Farm's going to have some fun.
Phil gave a very detailed answer to that question. If I were to give a headline answer to the question for any project, not just ours, it would be that experience in the last couple of decades tells us that market-based solutions where a major risk is transferred perform in a superior way to traditional means of keep a capital organization forever to build a big project even after it's done, procure and manage the way we've always managed. It's a departure from the way that we've always done things, and it's one that is likely to produce, I think, superior financial and operational results for us.
Janet, you got the last question.
Yeah, part of this is including Union Station, which of course brings in our major partner in Union Station, which is TTC in the city. So are they actively supportive of this particular approach, or are we going to have a challenging partner to deal with if we go forward on this?
I think they're engaged. They understand what we're doing. They are a good partner, and I don't see any obstacle created by our selection of a delivery model. They are themselves considering this delivery model on some of their future projects, so it does not appear that there are any issues there, and we will manage them if there are.
We've seen huge support from the mayor in terms of what we do on RER. He is very, very excited about the smart track stations, the services we run. We are talking very closely to the city on what East Harbour looks like. East Harbour is a massive transformation opportunity for the city in that part of the east of Toronto. And we're getting nothing but support from the mayor. And it's very exciting.
The mayor is very, very supportive of this approach. The challenge is, of course, is he's not the only partner within the city that we have to deal with on issues of this kind.
If I can pick up on that, because that is an important question. One of the things we have implemented lately, which I know the board discussed and the board had good challenge for us on the sponsorship model, we've implemented the sponsorship model, and the way that Leslie has launched that in her team has been fantastic. So, and we're going to get Josh to do some benefits management conversation with us later as well. But what we have done now is we've got a sponsor for City of Toronto, and the sponsor is Erin Morris, and she's fantastic. She is going to be the fixer, the troubleshooter, the pick up all of the loose issues and move them forward and get them to a good place. And that dedicated sort of, call it account management approach that we're giving the sponsorship is going to be invaluable for us on these projects, because it'll catch all of the loose ends that we need to move forward to make the overall delivery in the end a success.
I think we should also add that Metrolinx already works with TTC and the city on public-private partnerships.
That's why I asked the question.
Absolutely, with the Eglinton Crosstown and with the Finch West LRT.
Because I think this is a good approach to go, but not everybody necessarily agrees with it. So, yeah.
Peter, good update.
Thank you, sir.
Good report, all three of you. Thank you very much. Sounds as though we're in good shape on this. And just stay on course in terms of timeline. That's great. Next is the Auditor General report follow-up.
There's two.
Peggy, you got 5 minutes.
Chair, I'd like to introduce Hope Support, who's joined us as our Vice President.
Hey, Hope, welcome.
Thank you.
How do you like it here compared to California?
Interestingly, I've spent most of my career in about 120 countries, so I don't really feel like I have a permanent home, but I love Canada. And given our, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but given our past presidential election, I'm more than happy to be here. So.
Oh, welcome aboard. We're thrilled you cast your luck with us.
Oh, we have to stress, Metrolinx is non-political.
Understood.
Nice to have you on board.
Thank you very much, and
thank you.
Really appreciate this opportunity.
It's great to have you with us. Peggy, come on. You've already used a minute.
I'll be short.
I'm behind schedule.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I provided a full update to the Audit, Finance, and Risk Management Committee yesterday. It included going over the detailed action plans of the Auditor General's on the Auditor General's report. I'm happy to announce that the senior management team is on track to meet all of the Auditor General's recommendations by the designated time frame, which is early 2018, because they will come back in 2018 to do a full audit on the 2016 recommendations. I will say that having our new president and CEO has been great. He's gone over all the action plans with the team, and they've actually been enhanced to include benefits realization and benefits management, as well as more work on vendor performance management to include current contract management in that. So we've actually upped our game since Phil has joined us, and that's terrific. As far as the 2012 and 2014 report, I'm sure most of you noted that we were in the follow-up section of the Auditor General's report yesterday. We worked with them throughout 2017 and went through those old items and have action plans, which we will go through every quarter with the Audit, Finance, and Risk Management Committee until those are closed down. And we have full action plans, and audit will continue to check on them every quarter. Any questions?
Do you find the Auditor General being reasonable and fair-minded in her approach with us?
She is in right now doing work, and she's always been fair-minded as far as bringing her staff in to work with us. We provide an open and transparent work environment both ways.
If I could, the chair has had to step out, so he's asked me to keep the meeting going, and I would, if I could, I'll ask a question, a follow-up sort of to that, and that is, I too am impressed that our responses, our internal work on our response to the Auditor General is broadening out to build on some of the very positive things that external auditors bring. They bring a perspective, a point of view that we should pay attention to and build on by improving our processes. So I think that's great. And with respect to link back, though, to Anne's question, in terms of the report out yesterday, and I have to admit I have not read the entire section, as small as it is in Volume 2, was there any negative comment in there from the Auditor General on our work from 2012, or is it more just a positive?
No, the Auditor General is the first year that they've gone back to 2012 in all outstanding items for all agencies. So this is a new section of the report where they're going to start making sure that everything gets picked up. So we were just one of many that had to go back through our outstanding items.
But was there anything in there that was disparaging in any way?
No, not at all. We were able to work out new timelines to make sure that they can come back and audit against them.
Okay, great.
If I can add to Peggy's response, Peggy's very good work that she's doing to make sure our audit actions are clear and that our action plans are being implemented. We need to learn from any audit, internal, external, and we need to respond and make sure that we, in a very transparent way, deal with the issues that are raised. When I look at the Auditor General's 2016 annual report, which focused on contract management and contract award, there are many lessons in there which were all valid, all issues that we have to learn from. And from those several issues that we've picked up in there, in terms of how we award and manage contracts, we are learning and putting the right actions in place. And I think learning from any of these reports is our business. We need to continuously work at making sure we get better at what we do, and we will continue to do that.
Peggy.
Thank you, Peggy. Good work. Oh, sorry.
I just had one quick question. When you see the date 2012 and you see outstanding, you do have to shake your head a little bit and say, what is it that has kept us from addressing whatever the particular issues were at the time? And I thought they were contract management related, but they may not have been. That might have been the 2016 report. What's the gap all about for us in a nutshell? Why so long to address 2012 recommendations?
They aren't significant points in my mind. They are sloppy. We weren't picking up on them and making sure they were closed.
Okay, all right.
So, and that's what she's doing across the board with everyone, saying, we're picking up from 2012 on, and we're going to make sure you close everything.
Okay.
So it wasn't that we weren't doing.
No.
we
Well,
weren't
they're
following up, we weren't just looping back.
Yes.
Yeah.
Reporting back. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Peggy.
Thank you very much.
As usual, you're doing a heck of a job. Appreciate it. Chair of the Customer Experience Committee's report, Marianne.
Thank you. So I'm here to report on our committee meeting yesterday, which was, I think, it's an expanding agenda as we look at not only the issues of transit that's happening right now, but also looking forward to planning and designing for the future. So the first item of our business is always the Customer Experience Advisory Committee that's chaired very capably by Carl Zaire. I think they reported on many issues, but one of the ones that might be more entertaining is the customer etiquette issue, where I would note that they just use man and man-spreading in terms of the examples, because I'm sure women have just as many bad habits. I'm glad they haven't focused on them. So this apparently.
I don't think so.
Horses and bags.
Careful.
That was not raised in discussion.
Back to the report, please. No more
know.
editorial comments. Back to your report, please.
So apparently this was sort of identified in the Twitter accounts, Twitter world as being a very engaging campaign. There were also samples of the new bilingual automated announcements were presented to the committee, so we heard those and saw some of the small videos. I think one of the challenges at Metrolinx is to kind of continuously communicate to people what how hard the organization, to Phil's credit and the whole team are trying to actually make these changes and communicate what's happening. And I think so many projects are ongoing, so much is happening. Our communication, I think there's a renewed focus on making sure we're telling people what is happening. We always hear about GO bus and GO trains and the on-time performance, and we look at the deficiencies as well as the positive things that are happening through the GO network. Also hear about Up Express and bring anecdotal. The committee does discuss anecdotal evidence that we hear or experience ourselves and are addressing issues that relate to capacity on the trains and you know, the primary purpose of being able to get people to Pearson, sometimes the system's been so well adopted by the commuter population that there's a balancing going on, which I think is, you know, very thoughtfully being considered how to deal with these issues as we go ahead. Additional rail and bus services are being offering more choice to customers. We've just opened our 66th station, Downsview Park, that connects GO to the TTC, which Phil mentioned earlier. And then, you know, I think there's a real effort to kind of connect with community through the events that happen, the kind of national and special events that happen in our community. And I think there's always a surge in terms of providing an uptick on service when around these events. On Presto, the rollout to retailers has begun to happen. Shoppers Drug Mart has been very successful, and their first flyer promotion in November encouraged new Presto users to buy a Presto card with a higher load value to receive a discount. So it's important to continuously look for those. And I think, you know, we're working very closely with the TTC on an ongoing basis to make sure there's an update of equipment that's happening, and there are some you know, challenges as we go along, but I think that the end result of being able to just, you know, swipe your card is just so much more fluid than past systems. So there are announcements coming forward as well in the new year on the Presto. And then my favorite topic is design excellence, and so we're seeing that the focus on design excellence will begin to produce significantly better results, we think, in terms of using design thinking and strategy to actually improve the customer experience. And this is not something that's intended to cost more. It really is on the same cost basis to actually provide better service, better navigation, so that design excellence covers all aspects: operation, design and planning, and capital projects. So I think there's a new focus on that, and the team that's evolving has been, you know, brings real strength to this discussion, and has been happening over a couple of years. And then finally, safety is obviously the kind of the paramount value of Metrolinx, and I think a new, you know, there have been additions to senior management in terms of addressing any issues, and also a new focus on metrics of understanding where the safety issues are occurring and how they might be addressed. And again, Phil did refer to this, so that endeth the report.
Good job. Thank you very much. And through you to Greg and the team on the delivery of all this. Nice job, Greg. Very nice job. Are there any questions to Marianne? It was a very good meeting of your committee yesterday, too. Covered a lot of ground very efficiently and very effectively. Okay, let's keep going. You've made a nice contribution to getting us closer, Marianne. We're now only 5 minutes behind. We have the quarterly reports from our various colleagues. Presto, Robert, normally you take half the agenda. Today you didn't get any time, so are there any questions to Robert? Operations, Greg, anything you should be highlighting for us, Greg?
Marianne did a very good job catching a lot of these.
Great. Any questions to Greg on his report? Planning and policy, Leslie, you're on the agenda coming up. Any questions to Leslie on the rest of her report? Capital projects, Peter, you've had enough airtime. No questions to Peter. Communications and public affairs, Judy?
I just want to recognize the Toronto Community Benefits Network, who are here at today's board meeting to see an update on community benefits in our quarterly report. We can only do it in partnership with them.
Why don't you just introduce yourselves, those of you that are visiting?
John Cartwright, Toronto New York Regional Labour Council, and co-chair.
John, thanks for coming.
Rosemary Powell, Executive Director.
Rosemary, thank you very much for coming.
Phil Signal, construction liaison person, helping young people get the jobs.
Great, Bill. This is terrific.
Seymour Walters, Community Impact Coordinator.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that, Judy. That's very, very good. That's a very important initiative. Customer experience in marketing. Any questions, Anita? I see none. That's great. Man, it's 11. We're only 3 minutes behind now. Next is the resolution. This one requires a resolution at the end. This is the business case analysis and benefits management. Leslie, take it away.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm primarily going to turn this over to Joshua Engelian to take you through how we are fully integrating our business case work into our decision-making through a very clear stage gate process and the establishment of an internal investment panel to give ourselves assurance that the work we're going forward with is not just on time and on budget, but is delivering on the benefits that we always set out when we start a project. So, Josh.
Great.
Joshua, thank you for juggling your personal and your professional duties today.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks for being with us.
Well,
Take it away.
I appreciate there was some flexibility in the agenda. And I don't want you to get too excited by the slide presentation because there's only one slide. And I'm going to go to in a little bit later through the presentation. So really, I think Leslie set it up well, but really what this report is about strengthening our evidence-based planning and decision-making approaches and ensuring that we have best practices approaches in place. And there's really three key directions out of this report that I would like to highlight for the board. The first is as part of strengthening that evidence-based analysis is about enhancing our transparency and making our business case analysis, releasing that publicly for major capital projects, so projects and programs above 50 million in advance of relevant board decision making.
Just stop there for a second, because if we do a business case analysis for a project, even if it's under 50 million.
That's right, yeah.
Why wouldn't we release those two? I didn't understand why the 50 cutoff was in this. I realize if it's a small enough project, we might not do a business case analysis at all. But if we do one, why do we have a cutoff on public versus not at 50?
So the way I would say it, this is a minimum requirement. I think it would be because you are correct, there are smaller value projects that have high public significance and interest, and this would not prohibit us from doing that, but this one was trying to be more explicit about our minimum requirements for posting.
And what's even more about this, we're taking the business case implementation to a very systematic, very process-oriented way. And when you start to think about that, we will end up with programs rather than projects. So one thinks of projects, 50 million cutoff, and we could have explained it a little bit better, but the explanation itself becomes another page to the paper. We didn't want to do that. But when you start to think of a program, in the program you'll have an assortment of expenditures which will be below the 50 million cap, but the business case for the program will hang together. So as we go through this implementation, bring more rigor to it, I think what we should do to answer the chair's question, bring to the board some other indication of what value of projects and or other do not fit into that cap, and to what extent is that material or not, and we'll show you that.
And I have no trouble accepting there will be individual projects that won't be subject to this methodology. But if you apply this methodology to something, whether it's 45 or 55, to me doesn't make a difference.
Exactly right.
That's all.
That will do that.
Okay.
Phil, can I just clarify? I understood this to be life cycle of 50 million, which actually establishes a lower threshold. It's not, so I interpret that as actually a much lower threshold than 50 million as a one-time spend. It's over a period of years as well. Is that is that the right interpretation?
So Josh can clarify.
I think the other piece and where the 50 million also comes from is that that's the province's direction on what constitutes a major capital project through their Treasury Board guidance. So they also set out business case requirements to go through Treasury Board and financial approvals at 50 million for capital, and there's a 75 million for state of good repair. So that's a capital cost. That's not the life cycle capital operating. Okay. So that's the first direction. The second, as I think Phil just referred to, is about formally connecting the analysis around the business cases through the project life cycle and connecting that work through different stage gates so that we have appropriate and relevant evidence as a project or program moves from initial planning to preliminary design and into procurement, delivery, and operation. And then the third key direction is really about enhancing accountability for ensuring that the project benefits that we identify in the planning stages are achieved as outcomes. And that's our benefits management initiative that Phil referred to. So just to put a little bit more detail around those three directions. So in terms of the business case analysis, I think the board is well aware of the business case methodology that's been advanced over the last, probably since the beginning of Metrolinx, but 10 years, in building on a lot of the best practice work from Transport for London, work in Australia, New Zealand, and there's been a lot of research and work gone into that. And really the business case is a 4-chapter framework. So including strategic, financial, economic, and deliverability chapters. So the economic benefit cost ratio that we talk a lot about comes out of one of the key chapters of the business case, but really for a project to move forward, it should really perform well across all of those chapters, and that certainly takes a level of judgment. So we referred to already how we are going to make those business cases public. As we talk about connecting the business cases to the life cycle of projects and programs, this is really where my one slide comes in. The green button. There we go. And there is the proposed stage gate process in the report. This is really speaking to how we connect, that there would be 4 business cases across the life cycle of a project. You would have an initial business case that's done in the early stages as we're identifying a preferred option. Preliminary design business case, which is really about as we are confirming the scope, the costs, and all of those pieces of the project, making sure that we are continuing to make decisions that optimize the benefits and performance of the project. The full business case, it comes in when you are confirming that final option and confirming your approach around the more detailed design and the procurement, and that full business case would be updated if some of those factors change through the procurement process. And then part of this is also continuous learning and having a post and service business case. So as a project is delivered and a little while after, once it's in operation, did we deliver on those benefits that we originally forecast, and what can we learn from that as we do our next projects? And this kind of four separate business case structure is again really building from best practices elsewhere and recognizing the fact that as we advance a project from early planning through design, we know more about projects, we can make more detailed decisions and continue to refine and optimize those projects and really understand if new things arise, as they often do through design and delivery, how that impacts the overall performance.
And if we just take a practical example, to help to explain how to look at these business cases, it would be to take, for example, the station's business cases that have been widely reported on before. We expect business cases to change quite significantly between the different phases and the different stages that Josh has shown there. A business case is not a static document. The business case is the business decision or the business direction of travel at the point where you have that level of information. And where we have an initial business case with very initial information, we expect that to be a very initial sort of view of what the outcome of that particular business decision would be. But as your information matures through the design process and you get a better understanding of what service you're going to operate, especially the cases of what we'll report on soon, which will be how stations' business cases are affected with different service patterns, the business case shape and benefits change quite dramatically. And I think what we want to bring to this discussion with business case approach is much more maturity, much more evidence-based approach, but also a realism that business cases change during the life cycle. I think as an additional support for the points that Josh has raised, and I make this for the interest of transparency, I want to alert communities, the media, the bloggers, everyone to this now, so that because we're going to put this into every business case into the future. So clear visibility on the following point, please. You'll see in the paper on page 3, there's an additional inputs considerations paragraph. What that paragraph says very clearly and unambiguously is that a business case is one factor of the decision-making process where the decisions are made by elected officials. The business case is not the sole single answer of the choice to make an investment in infrastructure or transit or not. So we'll put this in every business case we generate. The business case itself is one factor. There are other factors why an elected official may decide to make an investment other than the business case itself. Those reasons could be socio-economic in nature. It could be that it's a particularly good policy fit with something else. Just look at hydrogen. Hydrogen itself will not necessarily be a good business case could be a poor business case for transit, but could be a brilliant business case for Ontario, and for all of the reasons Brian flagged up, for investments in other industries and the like. So elected officials in government may make decisions on business cases based on policy fit reasons, economic development reasons. There could be a transit choice to develop a part of the city that is underdeveloped or in a socio-economic situation that's different to what just the hardcore numbers of a business case would offer. So I think we must bring maturity to this debate that business cases is and are and always will be only one part of the advice we give back to elected officials in terms of how they make a policy decision. I think it's really important that we flag that up in this presentation because this will affect business cases in the next year, 2 years from here onwards.
Thank you for that, Phil. Just on the methodology itself, do you consider this best practice by the standards you've been exposed to in different jurisdictions? Like, are we getting our methodology to best in class?
It definitely is, and one of the good things about how Josh and his team has worked on this is they have looked at best practice in other jurisdictions. This is what's common best practice of what I've seen used, and this just puts us in the right place to deal with business case analysis and business case advice to government. And Josh, maybe you want to pick up on your best practice survey.
Sure, yeah. So I think one of the places that we've worked very closely with is the Institute for Transport Studies in Leeds that's been advising us on a lot of our framework around the economic analysis, just making sure that it's aligned with best practice. We've also been working very closely with the Ministry of Transportation's Transport Economics Office and aligning as much of that work as we can as possible. So as our advice goes forward to them, they're ready to accept it and bring it forward. So thank you, Phil. And I think that does highlight how, through the business case work, we are trying to make the best recommendations within the context of the Metrolinx mandate of an integrated multimodal regional transportation network. The last point that I just want to touch on really quickly is around the benefits management initiative that I referred to initially, and Phil spoke to the sponsors. So this is, in addition to this work around the stage gates and the business cases, this is really about putting the internal processes and protocols in place to ensure accountability around achieving those outcomes. And one of those pieces is bringing on program sponsors who will have accountability for the what and the why of the project. And as opposed to kind of the relay race approach where we hand off from planning to design to operations and all those pieces, that there are actually people in place through the life cycle of the project, making sure that as issues arise, as questions arise, we are making those within the context of maintaining and optimizing the overall benefits of the project. And part of that gets implemented through the different stage gates and the creation of an internal Metrolinx investment panel to be able to make those recommendations at each of those gates. And obviously continue to bring the recommendations forward to the board. And we are starting with this initiative on the RER program. We're learning as we go, and this stage gate process and the work will continue to be refined as we learn from our work.
Thank you. I'm still a little hung up on this 50 million threshold. Is there another way of expressing the same point? It just strikes me as an arbitrary number. I completely understand your point, that it's for programs, and it's for substantial things that are subject to this methodology. I just don't want it to seem cute that we're not disclosing things under what seems like an arbitrary number to me. That's what I'm worried about.
Can we take that away?
Can you imagine a way of expressing the same point? This is for these comprehensive cases, but that not necessarily best captured by a dollar figure as opposed to a description.
Josh, let's consider taking that away.
Okay. Others, it may be no one else has the slightest concern, but
I think it's a good point.
when I read it, it just
I
felt
think it's a good point.
strange. Does anybody have any questions, or are we happy to move this?
50 million.
Seems great. Rosie? Janet? Moved, seconded? All in favor? Done. Great. Great job, Joshua.
Thanks, Josh.
That brings us to your next piece, which is the draft RTP.
We need to move over.
Antoine, are you joining for this?
Antoine,
Lisa? Raj?
put Antoine here. Mr. Chair, I've got a whole team here to address this item. I know it's of great interest to the board and great contributions and passion to this item. This is the draft.
Am I right that originally we thought we would deal with the
Yes, I was
final at this point as opposed to February?
I was going to make that comment, yeah.
Okay.
So in September, you gave us permission to go forward and consult on a draft 2041 Regional Transportation Plan, which we are going to report back on what we've heard. But in anticipation of what we've heard, we've also now come forward to make a slightly different recommendation than you might have expected, in the sense that we are now, on the basis of what we heard, and there's an extensive consultation, we feel a high degree of comfort that on the question of the vision, the goals, and the 5 strategies the draft RTP put out, there is strong support for the overall direction and the strategic intent that the plan has laid out. The place where we have been receiving lots of interest, many more questions than we were frankly able to answer in terms of what we put on the table, was in the section at the back of the draft RTP entitled Making It Happen. Right. And this was around the areas of decision-making, funding. So what we are going to present to you and the recommendation in front of you is one, first of all, we have some recommendations on how to modify the actual strategies themselves and some minor commentary on the vision and goals, but not much. We are recommending that we sort of cleave off the Making It Happen portion of the document, that we go away and we have here presenting to you an outline of a discussion paper building on the Making It Happen, and that we bring back the updated draft front-end portion of the RTP in February as amended, and we bring back that discussion paper to go out and have a much broader, more fulsome discussion on the how of the plan. If we refer to the front end of the draft 2041 as we have a degree of affirmation that we've got it right in terms of what good looks like for 2041, the part that we want to go out and come back to you after consulting over the course of 2018 is on the how. And so I'm going to ask Antoine and Raj first to recap what we heard that has led us to this conclusion, and talk a bit about the outline of what we would want to go to discuss. I've asked Josh to stay here primarily because there is a link between this concept of benefits management and how we want to approach the RTP, and they tie together in terms of how we've described the outline of the Making It Happen discussion paper. So if it's okay, if you can allow Antoine and his team to take some time to take you through it.
Go for it, Antoine. Just don't go for it too long.
All right, I'll be very brief or I'll talk very fast. So Raj will cover how we consulted, and I'll cover what we heard. Great, thanks, Antoine. So at a high level, our board report, Metrolinx engaged with the general public, stakeholders, municipal councils, municipal staff, provincial ministries through multiple channels. At a high level, we had 6 public roundtables, had over 200 attendees. We presented at 10 municipal councils. We held 2 City of Toronto council presentations and presented at the TTC board. We had a transportation symposium. We had 200 attendees. We held 7 corridor committee meetings recently, held a stakeholder forum, and a number of speaking engagements which focused on the RTP that both Leslie and Antoine fearlessly did over the past month or two.
Wow.
And
All that, that's
all that.
impressive.
And of course, we did a lot of consultation on our website, metrolinxengage.com. I'm going to dive in a little bit deeper on the updated numbers there. The consultation closed on November 17th. We had over 30,000 unique visitors. We had over 1,300 new subscribers. We essentially doubled subscription to our database. We had over 6,000 downloads of the RTP. 3,300 respondents to the surveys and over 10,000 comments received, and we received 566 unique emails. The survey results have been provided at a high level as part of the board report in Appendix 1, and we're also asked a series of open-ended questions, and a number of key themes emerged as well as part of Appendix 1. After closing on November 17th, an email was sent to all participants that registered, and the site was also updated. Both channels thanked everyone for their feedback and outlined the participation numbers as well as messaging around future communications to come. And essentially, we've committed to posting a comprehensive update on what we heard on the site and emailing those who are registered to our site. And of course, this engagement wasn't possible without the tremendous effort of everybody that was engaged in this initiative. Thank you. So I'll be very brief. It's a challenge to synthesize what we heard from such a diverse pool of commenters. But I would say that there's 2 themes. The first is impatience. Councils, the public like what they see. They would like it to go faster. There's often a lack of understanding about how projects that they feel have been on the books or discussed for sometimes decades are not proceeding faster. And sometimes these are circumstances much beyond our control. For example, when we need to negotiate with our private railroad partners. There's a strong support for seamlessness, so door-to-door trips, integration across municipal boundaries, but again, impatience as to why this is not proceeding faster. In terms of land use and transportation integration, strong support in advancing the anchoring of these 2 areas, but I would say that there is no consensus regionally on what this looks like. We heard as many comments, for example, that there should be more parking provided at the GO stations and more alternatives. We also heard a strong appetite for greater clarity, and Leslie touched on this, who will do what, by when, how projects will proceed, and an interest also in understanding how this will be implemented and clarity on what roles Metrolinx will play, questions as to the roles of municipalities, the province, will that change? We do not have full responses to these questions. We have flagged in the draft that these questions needed substantial public debate, and this is why we are proposing a discussion paper. In terms of changes to the draft, we're not proposing, based on what we heard, significant changes either strategically or structurally. A lot of housekeeping, and I would say the main changes is to be more focused on the outcome, to develop a plan that is what good looks like, as Phil calls it, a shared regional vision of what the 2041 transportation network will be, that provides decision makers with many options on how to get there. The section called Making It Happen in the Plan would be displaced to the discussion paper and form the foundation of substantive discussion that would include how projects would be prioritized and phased, how they would be linked to what you heard about business cases and benefits management, how decisions would be made, and how these projects would be funded. Again, with through the lens of providing decision makers with options. We would also need substantive discussions around seamlessness and how to advance fare and service integration, for example, how to deal with the advent of new technologies such as on-demand services and autonomous vehicles, and how to further the integration of land use and transportation, especially since the growth plan is really brand new and that municipalities are only now turning their minds to compliance. So we will come back to the board in February with a discussion paper. We welcome input on the table of contents. We have solicited comments on the table of contents from our stakeholders. And what you will see is the formation of various tables depending on the topic covered. We know that we've engaged, for example, extensively with elected officials and land use planners, but there's many more stakeholders that will need to engage to fulfill this shared vision that is the 2041 Regional Transportation Plan.
Antoine, thanks. Just clarify for me then, at the February meeting, we'll get what I'm going to call Part 1 in proposed final form for approval
Yeah,
and publication?
Of the, I'm now calling the draft RTP.
Right.
Yeah.
Will become the RTP.
Yes. And then.
And second, we'll get a table of a refined table of contents, or
No, you'll get
a first draft?
A first draft of the
But
discussion.
not for approval, but for discussion,
For
and
the-
then another round of consultation?
Go out to get your agreement that this is what we'll go out and consult on.
Which may have some questions in it as much
Yes.
as answers.
Correct.
At that stage.
Correct.
On the Part 2,
Yes.
which is how to get it done.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Since you're asking for a delay from today to February for Part 1, can you make us a promise you'll give us 10 days to read it rather than 5 days to read it
I will give you.
for the February board meeting?
Pretty sure I can give you even more than 10 days, so I.
We'll do that.
Just because if we're all putting our signatures
Yes,
on that
yes.
one, on Part 1,
Yeah.
I think we got to have enough time to read it and send you a markup.
And I'm pretty confident, and I'm saying this, that is very doable, partly because, as Antoine mentioned, there are no dramatic changes from the previous, I mean, there's changes, but not dramatic. The changes are more in
Part
the
2.
second half, yes.
Got it. Let's open up for discussion. Ann was first, Janet was second.
Thank you very much. First, I want to say that I support the approach that you're taking, Leslie and Antoine, with respect to taking the time to delve into how we're going to make it happen, since it was cryptic in the report, but significant to say essentially that none of this could happen unless we can find the proper funding framework and improve the governance and solve the governance issues. So I think this was good, and Carl and Upcar and Kathy and I had the opportunity to be on a phone call with you, and thank you for the opportunity, and we agreed with this approach. So that would be my first point. I have 3. My second point is that there has been considerable public discussion now on issues relating to making it happen, largely governance. A very important piece by Marcy Birchfield from Neptus and Pamela Blay. I'm sure it came out in the media. That was back in November, I think 21st, where they said basically we've got a $45 billion plan, but it's not going to do for the region what we're hoping it will. But it was a lot, very much focused on the making it happen part. Very influential piece. This past week, there's been a number of pieces, whether it's the Board of Trade, Jennifer's piece this morning, Sharice Burtis from my own City Building Institute, again, on issues around how to make it happen. And finally, we ran this forum. Janet was on the panel, on this Rockstar panel we had, but last minute couldn't come, but Phil was there, Brian was there, and again, the discussion was on how to make it happen. So I would tell Brian and Janet that this very week, we are just finalizing a blog which goes into detail specifically on the issue of how better to leverage our real estate, not for TIF, but in a broader development framework to help to deal with the funding gap, not solve it, but to deal with it. And so I was very pleased earlier to meet our new Vice President of Real Estate, and I did, in the minute we had to meet, is Hope here, offer to connect her with the folks at the City Building Institute who are doing this new groundbreaking, I would say, research. So the third point my final point is, I would like to, from my perspective, I see this as an opportunity to strengthen our report, to give it credibility. And I'm tying it in just on my own, Phil, but I'm hoping to tie it in with your proposal to engage with regional politicians and transit operators informally, because one of the key messages, and this is my last point, out of the forum, was that unless we do the hard work of trying to create the consensus, trying to, I don't think it'll ever get solved, but trying to find common ground between urban, suburban, exurban, the people that make up the region, part of it being education, part of it understanding the promise of better transit and TOD, transit-oriented development. We're really not going to be able to make this plan what it needs to be for this very important region. So thank you very much, but I wanted to build in my expectation and hope that this is an opportunity to strengthen what we had in that area. Thank you.
Thank you. I had Janet, followed by Brian.
Yeah, you've got a number of critical stakeholders that you have consulted and will continue to be consulting with that are all very, very important to us. And then there are those who also think they're very, very, very important to us as well. How are you going to be getting back to primarily regional councils and mayors and chairs and that? Because some of them, and I certainly know from Durham, have made some pretty specific, feedbacks on various things. So are you going to be at some point before the next thing goes out publicly, getting back to them to say, thanks for this, we can do that, we can, just so that they don't think they've been ignored, or how are we going to be dealing with that?
So Raj mentioned that in February we'll be returning with a more detailed report. The intent of the report is not just to inventory what we heard, but to be able to say, this we were able to address this way, this we were unable to address because of, this we're still working on it. The intent of that report, and that full report is what we will circle back to all the councils that we went to, because it would reflect not only what they inputted to us, but what everybody else in the region was saying. And we think that one product so that is, I think, the mechanism. That being said, we on an ongoing basis return to councils repeatedly to hear and engage and dialogue, because they may or may not agree with how we've responded. So,
and if I can add to that and also talk to the points that Anne has made, it is unambiguous that in order to implement the right transit solutions for the Golden Horseshoe area, we need collaborative decision-making across multiple authorities. My personal view is to jump to a debate on governance structures is interesting, but not necessarily the right way for where we are now in this area. We are putting huge infrastructure solutions in the ground. We are making decisions consultatively now, such as the RTP. And what is important now is that we, as exactly as Anna suggested, that as part of that process, that we get the right decision makers that make decisions on a whole host of things, such as land use, municipal planning, transit planning, and then also investment to the right forums and to take that forward. In the new year, one of the really exciting initiatives we have as part of our strategic objectives, we have a portfolio of those which we'll make public in the next couple of months. Leslie is going to lead an setting up of an intergovernmental forum of transit decision makers, operators, where we make good transit decisions and put all of our momentum behind what the RTP looks like. The RTP, as it stands there today, is what good looks like. And I think that is everything that we have heard from communities confirms that that is what good looks like. So in that forum, we will listen and work together across the region with other transit operators on all of the difficult choices that has to be made from a transit perspective. It'll deal with debates on and deal with and conclude debates such as what we do with fare integration, what we do with priority setting on the RTP. And then we will also use that same forum to encourage elected officials to listen to the proposals we've put forward and encourage them to take our advice on board. And I think that's really important. We'll provide mechanisms for decision-making and building collaborative decisions rather than focus on some other unique governance structure to give us all of the answers. I think that's a really big part of the ongoing discussion and moving solutions forward into next year. And that'll be a big part of making it happen.
Just to finish, I mean, because what will help manage some of that debate will be how well you're able to do that feedback to them so they think they were heard, all of that.
Yeah, get some ownership.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Brian and then Carl.
I guess I'm building on both Janet's observation and then Phil's elaboration on the parts, but it seems to me to get it around in simple terms that I fully appreciate. In February, you're bringing back a document, the front end of the document is something that we will formally recommend as our idea of what the plan should be. And we sign off. The second document, the how-to or making it happen document, is much more a set of suggestions of the questions to be addressed and answered, and we'll contribute to that, though, by proposing some mechanisms and some facilitating capacities to allow that discussion to continue, including, but not exclusively, that forum that you just described of getting regional planners together and maybe, another forum for others. But we're not going to prescribe the governance solutions, but we'll get some action going. I think that's what, as I read the Metrolinx Act, that's sort of the front end is what we're responsible for doing, actually recommending a plan. The second end, it's in everyone's interest for us to contribute ideas on, now how can we make this happen? But we don't control that, and the best we can do, and I think it's a valuable thing we can do, is expedite it by providing mechanisms. Have I got it right? Or?
Absolutely right.
Correct.
Okay.
Just write that down as the
Yep,
minutes.
I got it.
Yeah.
Carl.
Well, that just made my comments much easier. First of all, I want to concur with the points that Anne made earlier from the discussion that we had, Leslie, earlier this past month. And my question was going to be related to, again, the timing. Brian has outlined it here in summary form, and that probably helps the point I want to make, that we are in a position as a board to put forward independent information to all people in the province, whether they be elected or the public, and that there is an opportunity, a significant amount of time with an opportunity for all of those people to feed their comments in before or during the election period of 2018. And some of that is, it's not only provincial, but it is municipal elections as well. And so the leaders of communities around the province will have that opportunity. I think it's very important for them to get that information in and put their positions forward at the same time.
Thanks. Bonnie.
Leslie, just a couple of questions. One comment and a question that follows. I was really thrilled to be able to actually see the summaries, even though I'm sure they weren't fully reflective of kind of regional positions and perspectives on it. And I just want to compliment you for giving us that kind of summary in this particular background document. I was also thinking about the call in it in many places for innovative funding strategies, stable funding, and new revenue tools, those three pieces. And as you think about the timing of the production of this Making It Happen document with questions, it'll be really important to have a fairly robust section in that funding, stability, and revenue tools because of the particular year we're going into that has a provincial election associated with it. So I think getting out early with a robust section in that piece would be extremely helpful to that conversation. And then I wondered about when you heard in several jurisdictions a call or a request for recognition of other projects that were significantly important to other regions, that weren't mentioned in the report. Is that mostly a product of what we had determined to put either out further or say weren't going to be a priority? Or is it that there are independent projects emerging in jurisdictions that they may be funding, but they would simply, in a holistic sense, like those incorporated? Or is it some kind of mix of all of that?
I was going to say, first of all, it's a combination of all those that you described. So I think part of the exercise is distilling through, and of course, we test all these pieces into the model to understand how they impact performance. This is why the Making It Happen is important, because it begins to try to flesh out in more detail the particular, based on what the what 2041 looks good, what looks good in 2041. So I think there, maybe Lisa, I don't know if you want to speak to how we will be dealing with what I call things that people added to the pot. Maybe that's how.
So we have a set of criteria that we've used in order to establish what goes into the plan today. And so we will take a look at, many of those we did look at actually, but we'll go back and revisit and make sure our assumptions are correct and that we have the right information from municipalities in order to make sure that we come to the conclusions that we have. And sometimes we will find that there are things that we did perhaps need to look at again and take a second look and come to a different conclusion. So we have a process that.
But maybe to link it to the conversation we had earlier with Josh around the notion that, you know, we will identify options and give our best advice, and then there are all the external factors. If for some particular reason an elected representative with the with the funding that they require decide for a reason that's beyond a transportation benefit reason or a it gives room in how we're approaching this for others to that are beyond our responsibility. Maybe it's the way I should say it.
And then my last question was, in the document you bring forward for us for approval next.
Yes.
Would the short Making It Happen section be virtually removed?
Literally, yes.
Document, then
Yeah,
in order
literally
to have
removed,
this next
yes.
big conversation? Okay,
yes.
thank you.
I might have one paragraph saying that it exists, but.
Yeah.
We have a next step
Leslie,
section.
team, excellent job. Okay, really good.
Can I just-
Smart new direction, refinement of direction. I'm very impressed by the consultation you've done and the work that, I know every time you consult, then you've got more work to do, so it snowballs, but it's great that you've done it. I think Janet's made a very important point about getting back all the different councils with their responding specifically. Even where we're saying we can't do something, letting them know you've considered it, and that's your conclusion. I think it's far better than not responding. So I think you're in great shape. We look forward to February. I do hope we'll get 10 days to read it before we're asked to put our signatures on it. And I think you've done a great job. So.
Can I just offer, first I want to thank, all these meetings happened in the evenings, not a lot of staff, some of them are here, spent a lot, but in addition to thank the municipalities, because their staff really, and Raj is nodding, really helped us very, very much in what the efforts they did to bring all the pieces. Councils were able to take it through their processes and their committees. Lots of the councils endorsed their comments, so they're not just staff comments. And it was a huge effort by not just the Metrolinx team, but our partners across the region. So.
Great. It's 12:34. We are scheduled to be finished at 12:35. If you want to send bouquets for that management, that's okay. Let me take the last minute to wish happy holidays to everybody who attended today. Thank you for coming. For those of you who watch online, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, all other celebrations in the holiday season. And may 2018 be the best year yet for you, your families, and for Metrolinx. Thank you all very much.